Have governments become too scared to govern? That's certainly the opinion of some, as the number of boards, task forces and committees continues to rise, all at arm's length from our elected representatives. It was Jim Bacon's grand vision, Tasmania Together, where the people were consulted to develop a plan for the state's future.
This is a long-term strategic process.
Look, it does seem that Tasmania Together was a starting point for this explosion in outsourcing decision-making.
Did it begin a trend of outsourcing government?
We haven't received that report. That report is still with KPMG.
Obviously it's going to take a little bit of time for the consultants that we bring in to do that work.
I would look at those reasons and I would take into account the advice of the state architect.
Very carefully the report from the advisory group.
What we need to do is go through the statutory review and see what it tosses up. What are the issues that have...
Reference group established, tasked with consulting widely around how we can address some of the viability challenges and sustainability challenges facing our government school system in Tasmania.
Have governments forgotten how to govern?
They've certainly lost a sense of what the public wants. They feel timid, I think.
Is it confined to minority government?
Not entirely, but I think the fact that the electorate is so volatile, and that's what's producing minority governments, is a major factor.
There are more than 130 state government boards and task forces at a cost of more than $6 million a year.
Look, it's massively costly. If you go across the whole of the public sector, the whole of the Tasmanian government, and you add up what's being spent on boards, on advisory committees, on consultant reports, we're talking tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, there's the budget shortfall in one go.
There's also the specialist firm the state government pays to help them find and appoint board members. In addition to the boards, there are statutory appointments such as the Social Inclusion Commissioner, the State Architect and the Children's Commissioner.
If it's about social inclusion, I would have thought that was a key role for left-leaning governments. The same thing around children. Why do we really need a Children's Commission? And we have a whole department responsible for implementing and developing policy around children.
There are also expert groups such as the Electricity Supply Industry Review Panel, the School Viability Working Group and a plethora of external audits. Tom Lynch from the Public Sector Union says it's a deliberate strategy.
The aim is to distance the politicians from decisions, particularly unpopular decisions, and allow other groups to make those decisions, and then the politicians get a report and maybe they act on the recommendations of that report at a later date.
He says that gives the government breathing space. The issue has gone from the headlines and the government is seen to be acting.
Look, I think there's numerous examples, particularly in the area of human services, where review after review has been done into child protection, it's been done into disability services, and wads of recommendations have been made, and that seems to be the end of the process. By then, there's been some distance placed between the crisis and the outcome, and then there doesn't seem to be the drive to go ahead and make implement those recommendations.
At the moment, we have the luxury that's unaffordable of so many boards, and yet so many highly skilled, highly qualified and highly paid public servants, and naturally the community is asking, what are all these people doing?
Are there consequences in terms of the legislative agenda?
If you looked at last year, you would have found that it was down from the two previous years. So we had the election last year and then a minority government. That slowed the legislative agenda down to some extent, and this year it's really noticeable.
I wouldn't say we've been running out of work, but it hasn't had the same intensity that you notice in other years when you do have a majority government, when they are confident in their agenda. Between
January and September in 2008 and 2009, more than 40 acts passed Parliament. In 2010, over the same period, there were 34 acts passed. This year, there have been 23.
Today in our House, that comment was made that we are seeing paralysis by indecision.
The House of Assembly now has more select committees investigating more issues, than any time in my memory. 6 is extraordinary, and almost entirely a consequence of minority government.
Over the entirety of the last parliament, there was just one lower house select committee. Is it all going into the too hard basket?
I think that's probably as reasonable an explanation in terms of just the dynamics of getting something through the parliament.
President of the Upper House, Sue Smith, says government departments are supposed to provide expert advice without fear or favour.
One has to question whether or not the public service, that is a higher percentage than anywhere else in Australia, has lost either the capacity or the confidence of the government to be able to do much of this work that we've seen happen in the past.
I think the expertise is there. It just seems to be that politicians are concerned that if they just get advice from their department, that doesn't distance them from the decision making sufficiently. They want to be further distanced.
Sue Smith says politicians should be making the tough decisions and standing by them.
It's the responsibility of the elected people to make the decisions and then to answer to their communities, both in the processes of going back to them and then, of course, at the ballot box. And if the community are not satisfied, they will make their decision at the ballot box and they will make it severely, as has been shown in the past.
Richard Herr agrees.
It's up to the politicians to have the public's views so that they can weigh up where the priorities should be. That's what we elect governments to do, what we elect parliaments to debate.
The Public Sector Union says another consequence of the growth in boards is a lack of transparency.
And I think in a lot of cases that's the reason why these things are set up, so that they are a step removed, and we're seeing it more and more. We're about to get it with Tasmanian health organisations, 3 new boards to run our area health services.
As the community comes to terms with massive cuts to elective surgery, Mr Lynch says he's been told by the department that the new health boards will each have 8 people on them, plus a chairman, at a cost of almost $1 million a year.